Hello, welcome again to FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Bob Scarborough.
And we are the FAIRtax Guys. You still have your scrolling banner. I still have Fat Albert. And I still have some of my North Carolina barbecue here. So we'll work on that as we go along.
Mr. Paxton from North Carolina lives in Florida and cannot get North Carolina barbecue. So he's found a way to get it down there delivered. And
Yes.
look, it absolutely looks great. It's Eastern North Carolina barbecue. For those of you in the Piedmont, it's completely different.
Yeah, that's different from what you guys get there in Winston-Salem. You're not far from the town of Lexington, where the Lexington style barbecue, which is very good as well, I have to say. But the Eastern North Carolina stuff, I first ran into it when I lived in Durham. A friend of mine actually had a barbecue business selling that stuff, and it was just there's really nothing like it. There's nothing else like it anywhere I've ever seen.
And in South Carolina, it was more mustard based, but it's all delicious.
Yep, that's true. All right. Well, let's not spend too much time on that. Let's get right into our FAIRtax Power Radio episode for the day. And we will start, as we always do when we don't have a guest, with our weekly look at Congress.gov to see what the Congress critters are doing to the tax code and what we can pull out by the roots and replace with fair tax. Actually, we're not going to use the pull out by the roots. We're going to use the dump the bowl of spaghetti now. Is that our new official metaphor for getting rid of the fair tax, or getting rid of the income tax and replacing it with a fair tax?
Yeah, we can interchange it though. I like the pulling out by the roots thing because that's a good visual because there's how many that root system up there you'd probably have to get a stump grinder if you chopped it off at the ground level. You had to make sure have somebody hang around and make sure it didn't try to grow back off of a piece of the root that was still active down there.
Well, I would use the Edgar Montrose method. Do you know who Edgar Montrose is?
Yeah, go ahead.
The Edgar Montrose was a character on the Red Green Show who was just fascinated with explosives. So I just get Edgar Montrose to stick a couple of sticks of dynamite up there under the tax system and blow it out of the water, whatever. All right, let's
disclaimer real quick. We're not advocating for anybody to go blow up the Internal Revenue Service.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, we're not inciting violence against the Internal Revenue Service. I just think Edgar Montrose was so funny. His solution to anything was just so we will blow up the income tax, but do it figuratively, not with actual explosives now. But we will get rid of the income tax system, which is the mess of a rail yard there over my left shoulder, and replace it with the nice, straightforward fair tax, which is right down the middle there. Okay, let's get going back with our Congress.gov segment. Our first one on the list today is H.R. 8504. This is a bill to amend the Internal Revenue Code to establish the Critical Supply Chains Reshoring Investment Tax Credit. All right. We've said so many times that all of the critical manufacturing, especially the pharmaceutical industry, we have outsourced so much of our manufacturing. And then, of course, during the pandemic, especially, we saw those supply chains just come apart. Billions of dollars worth of stuff that we need sitting in container ships offshore that can't be offloaded. And so, well, golly Moses, if we just made this stuff back here in the United States, we wouldn't have this problem. So H.R. 8504 wants to amend the Internal Revenue Code to establish a tax credit, a critical supply chain reshoring investment tax credit. I got a better idea. Let's just dump the bowl of spaghetti out, pull it out by the roots, replace it by the fair tax, and you will see all of the critical supply chains and a good chunk of the manufacturing that has been escaping our shores, escaping our tax system by moving offshore. That comes back home. Our supply chains are restored, and we do not have the problem anymore. If we can just get rid of the problem that is driving it offshore to begin with, get rid of the income tax, replace it with the fair tax. Okay. That will reshore our critical supply chains much faster than HR 8504 will.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, and we talk about this all the time, but the complexity of the tax code just bogs innovation bogs everything down. If a business, even an individual who was well off, they're going to pay somebody to kind of keep everything in order. Why are we still subscribing to this method of taxation when the alternative gives us an opportunity to advance our things that we like, advance our abilities to create and innovate, and streamline our entire country into a whole different mode of operation?
All right. Well, let's continue on. This is S4389, and this comes from your buddy Tom Tillis up there in North Carolina. A bill to amend the Internal Revenue Code to promote the increased use of renewable natural gas to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and other harmful transportation-related emissions that contribute to poor air quality and to increase job creation and economic opportunity throughout the United States. Boy, that's a scattershot bill that's trying to hit a bunch of things at one time. And why don't you just, instead of passing that one, pass the fair tax, which will do all of that stuff better?
I agree. Totally agree. Yeah. Come on, Rep. Come on, Mr. Tillis.
That means you got to go down there and have a little conference with Senator Tillis and explain to him that, of course, unfortunately, there is no fair tax bill in the Senate as we speak. H.R. 25 in the House has been up there since the beginning of the congressional session. We are still looking for a congressional sponsor to sponsor the fair tax in the Senate. I think we probably down here in Florida need to work on Rick Scott. And,
yeah.
Because he was he's definitely a fair tax friend, but I don't know exactly the degree with which he supports it. A lot of politicians will say they're for something, but then when it comes to actually delivering on what they say they believe and what they want to do, a lot of them just kind of back off from that. So I'll work on Senator Scott and you work on Senator Tillis. How's that?
Sounds good. Don't make me come up there, gentlemen and ladies. Don't make me stop this car on the side of the road. We're going to have a good talking here in a second.
Okay, now pay attention closely to this one. I guarantee you this one's going to confuse you just by reading the description. This is H.R. 8390, which is to amend the Public Health Service Act, the Employee Retirement Income Security Act of 1974, and also the Internal Revenue Code to require, get this, that group health plans and health insurance issuers offering group or individual health insurance that provides coverage for mental health services and substance use disorder services, that they provide such services without the imposition of cost sharing from the diagnosis of pregnancy through the 1-year period following such pregnancy and for other purposes. You talk about a long, winding strand of spaghetti, that's it.
Yeah, that's the one you're going for if it was spaghetti. It's not what you're interested in when it comes to the tax code, because it winds around and through and under, and it might could be.
It's stuff like this, which is why it takes 70,000 plus pages of statutes, case law, regulations, what all, to define the tax code in the United States, which is constantly shifting, as we keep highlighting every week here on Fair Tax Power Radio. I look at Congress.gov. And again, they got to require that group health plans and health insurance. I'm not going to go through that whole thing again, but it's that kind of stuff has absolutely nothing to do with the collection of revenue to keep the federal government running. So they just need to dump that particular strand of spaghetti out in the garbage can and replace it with a fair tax.
Absolutely.
All right, I got one more. This one's actually, this isn't really a proposal to change the tax code, but I thought this was worth bringing out and bringing into light. H.R. 8372. That is called the Debt per Taxpayer Information Act. This is from Representative Jody Arrington of Texas. The Debt per Taxpayer Information Act. There's actually a little bit of text in this one, and it says to require that the annual budget submission from the president to the Congress, that the president's budget and the annual concurrent resolution on the budget provide an estimate of certain additional information per taxpayer and for other purposes. And you dig down a little bit farther, and it says Section 6051 of the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 is amended by adding at the end of it this following new subsection. At the bottom of the employee's copy of the form prescribed for furnishing the statements required pursuant to this section, the Secretary shall include, with respect to the most recently completed fiscal year, the following information. 1. Total federal government revenue, outlays, and deficit, the total gross federal debt, and an estimate of the pro rata amount of the gross federal debt for taxpayers who will file individual income tax returns for taxable years ending during such fiscal year. They want to let each taxpayer know how much they owe on the federal debt. How about that? Totally speechless, huh?
Well, it's enough to drive people crazy, and it does. I mean, you think about just thinking about it, listening to you read that, it was like, oh, this big weight. So the immediate benefit is to your wallet with the fair. The other long-term and probably better for you benefit is to your health in the form of less mental anguish and stress dealing with this arcane method of taxation.
Yes. Okay. Well, I'll tell you what, that took a little bit longer than we usually take here on FairTax Power Radio to get into the Congress.gov segment. We want to continue with our trek through the white FairTax book, the original Boortz and Linder book that's saying goodbye to the income tax and the IRS. We're up to chapter 3. And this is one that we have talked about on FairTax Power Radio before, but Boortz and Linder, again, just bring this into crystal clear focus, and we'd like to share some of their words with the FairTax Power Radio audience. The myth of corporate taxes. And it starts out in much the same way that we've targeted withholding for elimination, which it definitely should be. The fair tax also targets corporate taxes for elimination. Now, some people will find this aspect of the fair tax objectionable. Why? What do you mean you're going to get rid of corporate taxes? Don't those evil rich corporations have to pay their fair share? But these people might believe that corporations don't pay enough as it is. After all, they've been reading in the press about all the obscene profits that these folks make. But the economic education of Americans is so woefully inadequate that many of us actually think we pay less as individuals when taxes are transferred to businesses and corporations. I'll let you in on a closely guarded secret. These corporations are not paying taxes now. But it comes right down to it. No corporation, no business really pays taxes. The burden falls on us. Individuals pay every dime of a corporate tax. We have hammered on that and hammered on that and hammered on that, and we will continue to hammer on that until people realize that a politician who wants to raise taxes on corporations wants to get it out of your pocket because that's where the corporations get it from.
The assets of our federal government are owned by the people who live here and pay taxes, though exercising any degree of control over those assets might be difficult.
Oh,
challenge every day from the other understanding, and the corporate tax is embedded in the retail price of the goods or the services that you buy.
Yeah.
So you raise taxes on corporations, they're going to end up pushing it to the consumer every time.
A corporate tax is just like any other cost of doing business. And on page 33 here, you've got the Kindle version. I hope you've got the same page numbers that we do. This is a little scenario that Boortz and Linder created. So they have a widget company that makes widgets, and they are now going to be subject to a 5% corporate tax increase, which is going to cost them $100,000 more in federal income taxes. So they said, all right, let's consider the possibilities this widget company has for raising that additional $100,000. One, it could pay the money out of the $2 billion in profits that it makes, but who does that profit really belong to? It belongs to the shareholders. You have 100 shareholders sitting out there waiting for their dividend checks, increase the taxes by $100,000, and each shareholder sees his dividend check decrease. So who's picking up the corporate tax? The shareholders who actually own the profit not the corporation. The corporation is just a legal entity that exists on paper. But if they take that way, they decide that, all right, we'll just pay this additional tax out of our profit. You're taking money out of your shareholders' pocket. People are paying that tax. You want to look at number 2 there?
Raise the price of the widgets is another option, which would cover the increased corporate tax. Another great and time-tested idea. If you can raise the price without affecting your market share, that is.
Mm-hmm.
And you're one fine business person indeed. But who ends up paying the additional corporate income tax? That's right. You're catching on. The customers foot the bill with the extra bucks they shell out for their favorite widget,
So you pay it out of your profits, you're coming out of your shareholders' pocket. You raise the price of your product, and if you can get away with that, and sometimes you can't, because if you've got competitors that didn't get an additional tax increase, if you raise your price, then they'll just start buying their widgets from the company next door, and you lose market share. But if you can successfully raise your price, then your customers are paying that corporate tax.
right,
That is great.
you may end up having to go back to your resources, your raw materials supplier, and see if if you can exert pressure there and negotiate a better deal in terms of your raw materials purchases.
But then again, if you negotiate a more favorable contract from your supplier, then your supplier has less money, and his employees bear the brunt of having less money, and maybe somebody gets laid off, they don't get the benefits that they want. It all trickles down to people. Number 3 here. Well, maybe you can cut costs to cover the additional taxes. All right, that's another solid solution. But just what costs are you going to cut? Maybe lay off a few employees and shoot for increased productivity. Good luck. At any rate, an individual, the fired employee, takes the hit. Cut back on employee benefits. Again, the employees take the hit. Buy cheaper components to make your widgets like you were talking about. Well, yeah, that'll work. But the reason Brand X components are cheaper is that they pay their employees less, offer limited benefits. Your original supplier takes a beating and passes that on to its employees and suppliers. So again, even under option 3, it is not the corporation that pays the tax. It is people who pay the tax. And I don't know how many times we can hit on this before people are going to understand that that is indeed an economic reality.
Yeah, it has nothing to do because you talk about people. One of the political wedges right now in debate is let's get the corporations to pay their fair share, and it sounds like they need to pay because they're not, and it all becomes political at that point. And I'll say right now that HR 25, the fair tax, is an apolitical operation. We don't necessarily look at the politics of it, other than it would be a better way to collect the revenue for the Treasury because it's simple and efficient and transparent. And through the book, we're going to get through that. Corporate taxes, that's a big wedge right now in discourse in this country. And you watch what happens if you raise taxes on a corporation. Next time, if something happens with a corporation, you pick a corporation and the taxes go up in that particular business category. And you watch what happens over the next year, 18 months to their price or to their employees or to what type of material they're putting out. Because one way or the other, they're going to have to change their operation in order to be responsible for the increased taxes. Has nothing to do with left, right, or center on the political spectrum. It has to do with the realities of a market, of the free market economy that we subscribe to.
Yeah, well, you cannot find a single way that a corporation can respond to higher taxes that doesn't end up hurting individuals. So Boortz and Linder continue here. If it's true that individuals are really shouldering the entire tax load, you're probably wondering, why even go through the process of having corporate taxes in the first place? It's a good question. The answer is deception. Tax collectors discovered long ago how convenient it was to disguise a significant percentage of government revenues as corporate taxes. Politicians realize the average American knows no more about corporate accounting and taxation than Dan Marino does about hockey goaltending. Dan Marino, a football player, not a hockey player. After all, they run the schools, remember? So politicians can pledge to raise corporate taxes, and the people out there just will actually praise them for it. It's a wonderful world indeed, when you can look a citizen in the eye and say, hey, pal, I'm going to take even more money out of your pocket by increasing corporate taxes. And the citizen shouts back, thank you very much, Senator. You demand. Oh, I'm not sure who wrote that, whether it was Boortz or Linder, or maybe a collaborative effort there. But that really says it. I'm going to take more money from out of your pocket. It's going to come in the form of a corporate tax, and you're going to love it. And they do. Crazy.
And it doesn't appear. It appears insignificant, I think, because the corporate tax burden is spread across the entire economy. So the impact to an individual is not as great as you would think, but aggregating all the cumulative amount of money that comes as corporate tax it's a significant amount. Slows down it slows down the business's ability to compete because now they're having to rework their business model slightly to take care of it. It's not just as easy as writing a check out. Something's got to go. The money's got to come from somewhere.
All right, our time's getting away here. We've got about 6 minutes left in the program, and I want you to skip down to the middle of page 36 there and pick up on a subject that we talked about here on FAIRtax Power Radio not too awfully long ago. Go.
I don't have page 36 on the Kindles. Where does it say?
You don't? Then I will read it for you. There's one more aspect of corporate taxation we need to bring up, and that is lobbyists. Washington is crawling with a virtual army of high-income attorneys and accountants who earn their living doing one thing: manipulating and gaming the federal tax system for the benefit of their corporate clients. One goal of the FAIRtax proposal is to eliminate all business and corporate income taxes, and as the FAIRtax movement gains more and more public support, the screams of alarm from this army of lawyers and accountants will be something to behold. After all, our plan will place their million-dollar incomes in dire jeopardy. They will fight back hard and dirty. It will be a no-holds-barred Donnybrook. These lobbyists and lawyers aren't concerned with economic growth or creation of jobs. Their one goal is to preserve our horribly complicated and convoluted tax code, the code that sets the stage for their belt-wearing heroics and huge paychecks. The money paid to the Washington lobbyists for tax code manipulation is just a small part of the total cost of complying with our tax laws. Money spent complying with the tax code is money that's not spent growing the economy or creating new jobs. Bingo, Boortz and Linder. Right on, guys.
Or savings. And I always bring up savings because the additional funds continue after the fair tax is passed. If you can continue to operate as if you were still taking that tax out and put it in your bank to save, or put it in to save, you will end up in a better position. Your whole family will end up in a better position as time goes forward, because you're not you have access to your money to make decisions about investments for you, as opposed to it going to the federal government. So after the fair tax is passed, if you are able to continue to operate your household, and you should be able to, without having that extra money right then, and save it, then the possibilities are unlimited as far as what you can do to create wealth for your children and on down the line.
All right. Well, I say we are continuing to go through the white original FAIRtax book by Boortz and Linder. I would again suggest everyone, if you haven't already done so, that you buy it. You can either get a hard copy or you can get the Kindle version. Amazon has it. I imagine there are other places online where you can get it. You can probably find some on eBay. But if for some reason you have not read the FAIRtax book yet, you need to do that, because we were going to be continuing to go through it here on FAIRtax Power Radio for the next several weeks. Again, I'm not sure when we're going to interrupt the series to have Steve Hayes on to talk about the Moore versus United States legality of taxing unrealized income case. But when that decision comes down from the Supreme Court, we'll have Steve here to explain it. Otherwise, we're going to continue our journey through the FAIRtax book here on FAIRtax Power Radio. Tell your family, your friends all about it. Again, here's an idea. Why don't you just buy 3 or 4 copies of the FAIRtax book and hand them out to your friends, hand them out to your family. I remember when I gave my mother a copy of it, and she read through it, and she looked up at me and says, "Why aren't we doing this already? It makes so much sense." Unfortunately, she didn't live long enough to see it happen. But I believe it is going to happen. But that's the reaction that I have gotten from everybody that has read the book and says, "Wow, why are we continuing to do this?" Let's see, that would be that way, pointing there to the mutt mess of the rail yard over there, when we can do it that way, the straight, right down the middle FAIRtax way of collecting income for the federal government. You just dump out all the spaghetti, all the stuff we look at congress.gov every week goes away with the FAIRtax. And again, we're supposed to be having a vote on the House of Representatives. So this will give everybody an opportunity to go get with your congressional representative, your House member, and tell them you expect them to vote against the income tax, vote to get rid of the Internal Revenue Service. In other words, vote in favor of H.R. 25 when it comes up to the floor for a vote.
That's right. It's our famous saying, once you understand it, you'll demand it. That story about your mom is perfect. So for those of you who are able to do so, purchase. They're not that much on the online.
Yes, less than $10.
It's worth it. It is absolutely worth it. And if you have friends that are electronically inclined, you can buy them a Kindle copy and shoot it over to them, and they can read it tonight.
Yep. Okay. Well, I say we're not going to be able to go through every word of it in its entirety, but we'll be going through some of the more pertinent highlights, if you will, of the FAIRtax book on FAIRtax Power Radio over the next several weeks. We invite you to join us with us every Tuesday night here on the FAIRtax official Facebook page at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, or you can look at the Rumble archive or the YouTube archive. But any way you do it, we certainly appreciate you watching and sharing the videos of FAIRtax Power Radio. And that's going to wrap up this edition of the program. Thank you so much for watching and listening. I'm Bob Paxton.
I'm Bob Scarborough.
We are the FAIRtax Guys, providing you the FAIRtax is the only truly fair tax. And once you understand it,
we'll demand it.
So tell me, how could I pay less taxes?
Less?
Yeah, I'm trying to get ahead, so how can I pay less?
Well, I suppose you could pay less taxes by earning less money, or you could give to charity.
How is that going to help?
Actually, I'm not supposed to tell you this, but if you know the right people, okay, or if you have a really good lawyer, you can usually get around the big ones.
If I may, under the FAIRtax, to pay less taxes, you would simply consume less. You would control how much you pay and when you pay your taxes simply by choosing what you purchase and when you purchase something.